Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer who is passionate about helping all of us to use the difficult things in our life to grow and show up as the best version of ourselves. I am joined today by my producer, Aaron Bender.
We have a guest today talking about advancing careers, specifically how women are either held back or can punch through that glass ceiling by getting past the broken rung.
The broken rung.
Yes, so we're all familiar, I would think, at least to a large degree, of what the glass ceiling is and such, and I'm sure you're going to get into it with Kweilin. But have you experienced that? As the owner of a law firm, you kind of control that for others, but have you experienced it?
Experienced what?
That glass ceiling, kind of being held back.
Yeah.
You know, you're a woman.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. I am a woman. I have not experienced that within my employment because I opened my own firm at 26 years old. So, I was the CEO at 26. I was also the janitor and the receptionist and the, the associate attorney, the senior attorney, the junior attorney, the paralegal, et cetera, et cetera. You get the point. But I do remember going to court. I mean, I still feel it now, like going to court.
Really?
Yeah. I was in court like last week and I was like, this is not going well. And I feel like it's because I'm a woman and I think he thinks I'm a lot younger than I am. And I really don't like the way this is shaping up. So I do feel that, when I'm out doing like in court, and particularly if I happen to be in a courthouse that I do not frequent all that often.
They see you and just immediately write you off or dismiss.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I feel that. I feel like I can relate to that. Yeah, but I'm also like, I don't know. I'm the type of person where I'm like, oh, I am going to prove them wrong, and maybe that's coming from a place of privilege. I don't know, but I'm like, I will show them, like, I'll make this right. There's going to be if there's a broken rung, I am jumping over it to get to where I want to go. And I don't know if that's the right approach, the wrong approach. I don't know if that excuses what happens out in the world. I don't know. I mean, I guess these are all things that we can learn more about and talk about with Kweilin. We are joined today by Kweilin Ellingrud, co-author of The Broken Rung. She is also McKinsey & Company's Chief Diversity Officer, a director of the McKinsey Global Institute, and an expert on gender and racial equality, AI, the future of work, and global competitiveness. Kweilin, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Holly. Great to be here.
Wow. Clearly you have broken the glass ceiling, climbed the ladders, solved broken rungs, because you are doing a lot. That's amazing. Your bio is very impressive. This is going to be a very interesting conversation today, but let's kind of start at the basics, because I don't know, to our viewers and listeners, I don't know where they are in terms of, gender studies and women and careers and all of that. So can you first explain to us, like, what do people mean when they talk about the glass ceiling?
Yeah. When people talk about the glass ceiling, they're talking about that very most senior level of leadership in a company, bumping up against the top, but not quite being able to get promoted to that CEO level, for example, or that tippy top role. And that's frankly a very good problem to have. But really, less than 1% of employees actually make it up to that level, to that very tippy top C-suite. Mm-hmm. The typical set of direct reports to a CEO is about a team of 10. So there may be 10 people at the very top, one CEO. Almost nobody makes it up to the glass ceiling. And yet we talk a lot about it. And so when we were exploring that question, we said, well, what about the other end of the spectrum, right? Everybody has to go through those early entry levels of the talent pipeline. What are those people encountering? And that's where we got into the broken rung.
Okay. And so what compelled you to like devote your work to this issue?
I've been spending the last 10 years leading research on gender equality around the world. How do women and men advance differently in the workplace? And each time I would share the insights, it was new news to people. Women didn't tend to know because a lot of the information is out there, but it's in reports that are 200 pages long. And so I wanted to distill all of the insights across an entire career, from early days, making early decisions on what company to choose, what occupation to pick, building skills over a lifetime, and kind of fully across a career. And so what we've done in the book is distilled the facts and the insights, but also combined those with success stories. So we interviewed over 50 women around the world, different industries, functions, countries, and basically shared their success tips at each of these pivotal career points of what they did well when they were choosing the right company, when they were picking their occupation, when they were building networking skills or technical skills.
Yeah, okay. And I want to make sure, I usually show the book right off the bat, but I didn't this time. So I want to make sure to show the book,
Great.
The Broken Rung, When the Career Ladder Breaks for Women and How They Can Succeed in Spite of It. So when you guys talk about the broken rung, tell us what you mean by that.
Absolutely. The broken rung is that first either missed or delayed promotion to manager. If you think about a talent pyramid, at the very bottom, the entry level, that's where 70% of the employees are. And many people might never make it past that entry level in their entire career, right? Some will get promoted to manager, and that is that first broken rung. The numbers are for every 100 men who are promoted to that first manager role, 81 women are promoted. So there's 19 missing women in managerial positions, even at that first promotion level. And it's even a sharper drop off for women of color. So 64 Latina women are promoted for every 100 men and 54 Black women.
Okay. I did see those statistics in your book. So why?
I think the challenge is multiple-fold. Lots of things going
I
on.
asked, I'm like, why? As if you're like, well, because this, duh. I know it's complicated, but let's hear it.
It is complicated. And we actually, looked at some of this data, and about 1/3 of some of those challenges is from more breaks and longer breaks that women take, right? So every 10 years that men are spending in the workforce, women on average are spending 8.6 years, because around childbearing kind of years or time period, we take more breaks and longer breaks. The other 2/3 of some of the gaps, though, that we see both in promotion and in the pay gap is around different decisions that we make around jobs that we take. So we might take more flexible jobs that are more aligned with our values, or less kind of overtly competitive jobs. And so those different career choices over time lead to lower pay as well, and lower promotion rates.
And so in your research, do you attribute the different career choices because women I know you said they usually take jobs that are more flexible or that align with their values. Is that also connected to motherhood and having to raise children and things like that?
Exactly, Holly, because women in the United States do about twice as much unpaid care work as men, right? So the taking care of kids, shopping, cooking, cleaning, taking care of parents, taking care of in-laws. We're doing on average twice as much of that. In fact, around the world, we do 3 times as much unpaid care work. So the US is a bit better than the global average.
Okay.
In India, women do 10 times as much unpaid care work as men.
Oh my gosh,
But
I'm
because
not
we're
moving to
spending more
India.
time outside of work, sometimes, right, the choice is I need more flexible hours or flexibility at work as well. And so some of those choices are for that. Others are not, right? So 20% of the pay gap and some of these gaps in promotion are not showing up in the data. We can't explain them. And so that suggests maybe it's bias, maybe it's other factors that we can't quite capture in the data.
Okay, interesting. So with the facts that you have been able to capture in your research, do you think if you had to choose one or the other, is the broken rung and sort of the issues with women, succeeding all the way to the top in a career, would you say it's more do we cause it? Is it the choices that we're making, or it's external factors placed upon us?
It's both. It's both kind of system-wide changes, things, that companies could change, broader systems could change, and it's choices that we're making. And it's both of those things coming together. I think at this moment, with the broader environment on diversity and inclusion, you hope you work for a company that supports diversity and inclusion. But even if you don't, I think the encouraging part is we can control a lot of our own decisions and make the right kind of optimal choices for ourselves across our career. And many of those are things that are good for men and women to do. Now there's sometimes gender gaps in terms of how frequently men and women do them, but they are good career steering points for both men and women.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple of examples, Holly. I think
Sure. Yeah.
the biggest thing that both men and women can do, and especially women, is choose the right company. In fact, when people chose the right company, especially early on in your career, because then you have your entire career to benefit from it, that's correlated with 50% higher income, lifetime income. And
Wow.
choosing the right company boils down to three things in our data.
Okay,
The
you stole my
companies we call kind of
question.
people and performance winners because they build the skills, what we'll call experience capital, at a much higher rate than other companies out there. And those companies do three things. Number one, they invest in your learning and development deeply. That could be a percentage of time. That could be a really rich and kind of high expectation to continue learning, whether that's digital or in-person training. That could be a strong culture of mutual feedback, but they invest in learning and development.
Okay.
The second is they believe in cross-functional rotations. So you don't start in finance and then end in finance 35 years later. You will
Okay.
rotate around. Maybe you're in finance, then you're in the business, then you're in HR, then you're a different part of the business. And you learn to see the problem in your industry from different perspectives. And
Okay.
finally, those companies have a really clear strategy. And you can tell this based on how they're performing relative to competitors. And if those three things are true, those companies are going to help you build your skills at a much steeper rate than other companies out there. And it's the best thing you can do to maximize your lifetime income.
I had to bring out my big paper because I'm like, I want to be one of those companies. So I'm writing this down. Okay, but so the third one was a clear strategy, and you said you have a clear strategy because of something with the competition. What was that?
You can look at their financial results relative to competitors. So are you
Okay.
doing well in terms of profitability, market share?
So I'm really sort of shifting how I'm approaching this conversation because, and I guess we could talk about it from both aspects, but, originally in my mind, I'm like, I'm approaching it from being a woman and wanting to get to the top of your potential and not being held down by a broken rung or a glass ceiling or anything else. But also, I own a law firm, and so I employ people, and of course I want to be the right company, and I want to be those things for all those people, men and women, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I'm really interested in this cross-functional. So from that perspective of like being the CEO of a company, being the owner of a law firm, this cross-functional rotation
Yes.
from an employer's perspective, how do you make that happen when, you hire people? Like in my case, I hire, we've got lawyers. And so to me, that's like, well, that is an interesting question. How do I make sure that they're well-rounded when they really have sort of one specific skill set? And that's probably the case with most roles. You hire them for their specific skill set. How do we ensure the cross-functional rotation?
Yeah. And that might be at earlier stages, right before they are more senior
Okay.
lawyers. So when you
Got
first
it.
hire associates out of law school, is there perhaps a rotational program where they're getting a sense of different specialties across the law firm? You could also rotate a bit more across support functions. So, back to the
Yes.
finance, HR, IT
Yeah.
examples.
Okay.
Not that you're, changing around every 6 months, but every few
Yeah.
years, and getting a sense of kind of different challenges. I think this all comes back to this notion that we call experience capital. And what
Okay.
we found that was so interesting is half of a person's average lifetime income is due to experience capital. And that's all of the skills and wisdom that you learn on the job. The other half of lifetime income on average is due to education and the characteristics you bring to your first job. But if you think about this as 50-50, and it might be a little bit higher for lawyers because quite a bit of education required to even get the first job. But on average 50-50, how do we really maximize the experience capital part of that is what companies could be much more focused on, I think, because if they can help build the skills of their employees, that's great for their employees. That's also great, right, for the company.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I did want to ask you about, because one of your tips was to change jobs often early in your career to gain what you call the experience capital. So if you're unable, I think maybe ideally you would get that experience within the same organization, right? But if that opportunity isn't available, then you would have to go from job to job, right? Or organization from different organizations. What impact does that have on sort of now you're interviewing for a job, you're presenting your resume, and it's like, okay, well, you've been at 5 different companies in the last 2 years. What's going on here? What impact do you see there?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a great look. So we did some research on when somebody takes on a new job, and to your point, that could be within a company, that could be in a new company. The average, what we call skill distance, is 25%. So 25% of the skills that you use in a new job were skills that you did not use in your old job. So on average, 25%. If there's anything more than that, let's say there's 30, 40, 50% new skills, that's what we called a big, bold move. A bold move is when you're really stretching yourself from a skills perspective. You're probably uncomfortable. You've not done a lot of this new job before. And if you can positively reframe that in a great way, because you're actually building your experience capital, right? This other half of your lifetime income, you're building the skills that are going to pay off well. It's one of the best things you can do for your career. We suggest to do big, bold moves, not all the time, not too frequently. In fact, in the data, they happen about 1.7 times per decade, just, once every 5-ish, 6-ish years. Which is good because, frankly, they're a little exhausting, right? You're stretching yourself. You're learning a lot of new skills. It takes a few years to even settle into the new role and kind of hone and refine those skills. Interestingly, women and men make the same number of big, bold moves. They're best if you do them early on in your career because you have your entire career to actually reap the benefits of all those skills that you built. The difference, though, is that when men make a bold move, they're much more likely to increase an income quintile. When women make a bold move, they're much more likely to stay at that same income level or even decrease an income quintile, right? Back to trading off compensation for flexibility or other dimensions in their career.
So it seems like what you do in the beginning of your career is critical to the rest of your career.
Absolutely, right? Setting yourself on that right trajectory, a very steep learning curve, a skill building curve. And that's everything from picking the right company that we were talking to about to, making those big, bold moves. Another piece that's critical early on in your career is what we call staying in the power alley or experiencing the power alley. So you own a law firm. The lawyers in a law firm are the power alley. It's how you make money. In a consulting firm like mine, it's being a consultant. At a tech firm, it would be in product development, product management. In many other places, it would be in sales or distribution. You'll hear people say, stay close to the cash register. And what we find is when you spend a few years in the power alley, that's correlated with about 20% higher lifetime income. And just over a third of men start in the power alley, just under a third of women. And you don't have to stay there forever because there's a certain intensity, right, to being in that power alley. You might stay there for 2 years, 5 years, but gaining that perspective of how is the business run, how do we make money, is critical for all of the other rotations and roles you'll take on afterwards. And if you can set yourself up early on in your career, as you describe, in those right ways, you'll have a very steep learning curve. You'll have basically a really fast rate of building experience capital, and that will serve you well to either maximize your lifetime income, if that's what you want to do, or if you want to trade that off for other things that are important to you, it will give you the broadest set of choices as well.
Okay. So I'm just thinking back to, I'm not in the early part of my career anymore. And well, that's actually a good question. So these years that are kind of critical, what time frame are we talking about specifically? Is this
I would
like
say
in
the
your
first 10
20s?
years
Okay.
are things like, choosing the right company, making those
Yeah.
bold moves, getting into the power alley. It's never too late. So let's say you're 15 years into your career and you find out, wow, I haven't picked the right company. I haven't ever
Mhm.
experienced the power alley. It's not too late to go back, but then you only have fewer and fewer years
Right.
to reap the benefits of kind of doubling back and making those decisions.
Right.
But Holly, even kind of in the thick, the sort of pinnacle of your career,
Yeah.
there's also a number of things that are important to kind of keep that experience capital curve steep. So
Okay.
building a broad set of skills. And
Mhm.
we talk about it as the multiplier effect, but networking. And what we
Mm.
find is that 70% of jobs are not even posted. So if you don't have a strong network, you're not going to be able to access these opportunities. And women and people of color tend to be over mentored and under sponsored. When it
Oh.
really comes to getting an opportunity that didn't exist before, that happens less for women and people of color. If you want to have a coffee chat and get advice, right, lots of opportunities for that, but
Yeah.
that's not what really makes a difference. It's really the betting your political capital, opening up opportunities, creating step up opportunities. That does not happen as systematically.
Interesting. Okay, so the phrase over mentored, under sponsored. I understand what mentoring means. What does the sponsoring part mean in the context of how you used it?
Sponsoring means creating an opportunity that
Okay.
wouldn't have happened otherwise. So
Yeah.
somebody comes in, gives me a special project to work on, could mention me for a specific role or a promotion, right? They're in the room when those discussions are being had,
Mm.
and putting my name in the mix, supporting, a promotion or a step up opportunity of some sort.
Okay. So, in thinking back to the first 10 years of my career, I mean, I might have been a little bit delayed because I had to go to college and then law school, So, coming out of school, I think I was 26. Maybe if you're coming out of college, you're in your younger 20s. But I mean, by the grace of God, I feel like it's worked out. But
Yeah.
I certainly was not thinking at 26, 22 years old, or really anywhere in there. I really wasn't thinking about these things in this way. Do you find that people in their 20s nowadays entering the workforce, starting their career, are they thinking about these things? And if not, how do we help them do that?
I think they're thinking about some of these things. They are
Okay.
thinking about what kind of company should I choose? What would that look like? I don't think they're thinking about experience capital because we
Right.
we sort of named it and gave it a vocabulary. And how do you build
Mhm.
your skills and get paid for that over time?
Yeah.
Thinking about that across a career, I think, is not something that at least I was thinking about at 22.
Right.
I think the bold moves are something maybe some people intuitively understand, but again, don't have a name for
Mhm.
it. The power alley, I think that, stay close to the cash register is something that many people have gotten advice on, but
Mhm.
perhaps don't know kind of the data behind why it's so important or
Right.
just how important is it to compensation over time. So some of these things I think are intuitive. We may just put a vocabulary behind it and also give you a
Mhm.
sense of, wow, 50% higher if you pick the right company,
Yeah.
20% higher if spend some time in the power alley. These are really big differentiators. They're not
Mhm.
small things at the margin.
Yeah. Okay, and now shifting gears more to being sort of, middle-aged, I guess, if that's the term I want. I'm thinking about, in the law firm, we do family law, so, divorce, a lot of our clients are divorced. A fair amount of the women that we're either representing or on the other side are finding themselves being, in midlife. They're not in their 20s, they're probably in their 40s or 50s, and now they're looking at re-entering the
Yes.
workforce.
Yeah.
How do you counsel them with,
Yeah.
using these same principles?
I would say a few things. One, the networking is critical.
Mm.
Um, because in terms of finding the right opportunity, like through networks and people who know you is going to be really helpful. And
Mhm.
then in terms of building skills to kind of future proof your career and make sure you're still relevant and understanding things, there's two skills that all of us will need more of, including people re-entering even after a break. One is technical skills, and
Mm.
not can you code, but can you interact effectively with technology to understand its impact on your group, on your organization? Can you become a super user or even a translator between technology and its business impact? And the
Okay.
second kind of skill to future-proof your career is around social and emotional skills, or what we call the soft skills.
Yeah.
And there's this myth that, either you have EQ and you were born with it or you don't. But soft skills can absolutely be built. And this includes everything from negotiation to empathy to leadership to inspiration. You can identify a soft skill and then systematically build your skills in that area. And I think even signaling some of your soft skills, your leadership skills, your other skills on your resume very clearly helps get considered for some of those jobs. We find about a quarter of the skills required, especially for more senior roles, are more in the soft skill category.
Interesting. Okay. I'm just kind of throwing this question out. Do you find, or has the research shown that women tend to be more inclined to have the soft skills than men, or no?
Yes, in terms of soft skills, there's a broad distribution. It is largely overlapping, but women on average have higher, soft skills. Now that could be a catch-22, right? Because if I expect a woman to have better soft skills and then they don't, if they're on the lower end of the distribution,
Yeah.
then perhaps I'm negatively surprised.
Oh.
But on average, yes, they do have more soft skills. Now, I would say the full distribution could really shift to the right, and we could all build more soft skills given the shifts that we're seeing
Yeah.
between generative AI and demographic changes and the way jobs are changing. We're all going to need a lot more of these soft skills.
Interesting. Okay. And now, talking about motherhood, I remember, I started my own law firm, right after I passed the bar exam, shortly after I passed the bar exam. So I really internally within an organization, I owned the law firm, so I wasn't experiencing those, the glass ceiling and all of that because, well, I was the CEO and the receptionist and the janitor and all of that starting off. But I will say, I have 3 children, and I remember I always hid my pregnancy in court, and to my clients, I always hid it. And I recall some, specific instances where in the context of being in court and being a woman going up against, much older men and, like physically larger men, I could feel the weight of my gender in those sort of instances. So although I haven't experienced it within an organization, I feel like I can relate to some of that.
Yeah.
What do we do about the whole motherhood thing? Because
Yeah.
it does seem to be, it does seem to be detrimental to a career, to climbing in a career path.
Absolutely. And Holly, let me just give you a little bit of data around what you're describing.
Okay.
We see, and this is not just a US phenomenon, we see this globally. There is a motherhood penalty and a hot fatherhood bonus. So when you
Oh.
compare women with children to women without children, women with children are less likely to get the job, much less likely to get promoted. The opposite is true of men. When you compare men with children to men without children, men with children are more likely to get the job, more likely to get promoted and paid more. And the effect goes up the more children the father has. And when you dig
Really?
underneath and ask a bit of, why, the
Yeah.
father with children is perceived as more stable, more likely to
Oh.
stay, may need higher income to support his family, but the same is not true of the mother. And so around the world, we really have this motherhood bias or penalty and this fatherhood bonus. And that's true when we see kind of bias, whether it's in the courtroom, in workplaces as well. We can do the closest thing to scientific experiments now with resumes. So we can give you exactly identical resumes, John Doe versus Jane Doe. And men and women will ascribe greater leadership and higher future potential to John Doe. Neither of these people exist, right? We fabricated
Yeah.
the resumes for testing purposes, but we all think of leadership as male, often tall and white. And so we think John Doe has higher leadership and potential. And now if Jane Doe puts on that exactly identical resume, active parent-teacher association member, or some signal that she is an active parent, much less
Yeah.
pregnant as you're describing,
Right.
she's 87% less likely to get that interview. And so that is motherhood bias in action.
Yeah.
And so as a result, as you're saying, what do we do? I think we
Right.
have to plan carefully for when we're going out on a maternity leave. When we are on a leave, right, how do we stay connected to sponsors periodically or at key points? And then especially when we're back, how do we on ramp with momentum so that we're skipping as little kind of pace as we possibly can, and we're continuing to build that experience capital as we on ramp.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of discouraging. The data that you cited is discouraging. And is it really just because it's been so ingrained in us for so long that men, can do certain things better? They are more leaders. Is that where all this is stemming from? Is just decades and centuries worth of societal conditioning?
It's that and a bit of this kind of parenthood issue of, 3/4 of Americans believe that fathers are more dedicated to their careers than mothers. And so it really is this parenthood piece, back to that 87% less likely if I put active parent teacher association member, the thought process both from men and women is that woman is going, or that person, in this case, that woman is going to prioritize being a parent. She's not going to prioritize being an employee. Therefore, that is a less good kind of employment choice for our company. And so that kind of at odds with, being a parent in our society is a real challenge.
Right. So I understand that there's this sort of bias, but is there a part of it that's true? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so when I just think about me and my husband, and we have kids, it's hard, and he's an amazing dad. He's super supportive. If I'm gone, he'll be there in an instant and he'll take the day off. He does whatever he needs to do. But I certainly notice a marked difference. If I have to leave for business, I feel really bad about that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, I'm going to miss this performance of this or that awards thing. And he's like, what's the big deal? Like, it's fine. They'll live. It's really good for them to see you go off and do your thing. So like, in my own personal experience, I mean, it could be true that like a mom, me in particular, again, just speaking for myself, and I don't want to say is more devoted, but it's like it carries more weight for me to be there, whereas he really doesn't have an issue being gone for something, missing something, or if you know what I'm saying? So are some of these biases actually true? And how does that impact all of this?
It may be true for you and your husband.
Yeah.
If we kind of assume that's true for everybody on average, then we're penalizing all women and not giving them kind of a fair, balanced kind of shake at work.
Okay.
And I think that's the challenge is when we kind of make the blanket assumptions that everybody is like that, or if, you are an active parent, then you can't be as good at work. I think that's the challenge and the trade-offs that we're wrestling with.
Okay, I think I should have, and again, I'm very careful to say this is my personal experience and it could be nobody else's on the planet. But I guess the real question is like, is there some truth to the gender bias? Because women are sort of in their DNA a certain way and men are in their DNA another way.
I would say, I mean, I don't think it's in the DNA. I think
Okay.
I have 3 children as well, 3 daughters. And my husband and I have exactly the opposite dynamic as you described.
Okay.
So I think, it differs from couple to couple. I think it's just when we assume a certain thing based on gender, that's when we get into kind of tricky territory, both outside and at work. On average, it's true, women are doing twice as much unpaid care work as men. So we're certainly spending more time on these things outside of work. And so, less time perhaps to spend at work. And that's, I think, also reflected in the more breaks and longer breaks, which is, driving a third of that pay gap that we see, the 27 cents on the dollar pay gap by gender that we see in the United States.
Got it. Okay. So I know we're just about out of time. Like, let's end on a good note. What can you tell women that's like super, oh, I know. Okay. This is what I want to ask for my last question. Gosh, I hope it's a positive note. Has it gotten better than it used to be for women?
Yes, we are moving in the right direction. So
Okay.
we are making progress at the most senior levels of the talent pipeline.
Okay.
Senior vice president levels, C-suite levels. We're now at 29% of the C-suite, so just under 1 in 3. That's improved about 12 percentage points over the last 10 years. So significant improvement. And, on a 10-person leadership team, that's basically one different hiring decision, kind of the law of small
Yeah.
numbers helping us there. I think other good news is women are now 59% of college degrees in the United States, right? So academically, we're really outperforming. I think the surprising thing is then when we first enter the workforce, we're already falling behind at that first broken rung, that first promotion step. But academically, in terms of preparation for the workforce, we're doing exceptionally well and have been, frankly, for about 40 years now. So 59% of college degrees, 70% of valedictorians, higher average
Wow.
GPAs, majority of masters and PhDs. Academically, I think we're doing exceptionally well. How do we carry that through all the
Right.
way through kind of that career pipeline? All the way till the end. And you mentioned many of your clients are divorced and kind of thinking about
Yeah.
re-entering the workforce.
Mhm.
One of the things that surprised me the most in some of the research we did was we know women live longer, which is wonderful news. But I did not know that women also live 25% more years in poor health. And so we need to prepare for that physically. We need to advocate for ourselves in terms of our symptoms, but we also need to prepare for that financially. And unfortunately, because we're living longer and in poor health for 25% more of the time, we spend more on healthcare. On the other end of that, we have lower retirement readiness, right? We have the majority of part-time jobs, lower
Yeah.
average retirement savings. We're saving less, and that needs to stretch for a longer period. So my advice for all of us is get more involved in your financial decisions. Know where your
Okay.
investments are,
Yes.
understand that, be financially independent if you can. But just getting educated and involved in your financial decisions. So not only can you maximize your lifetime income, but you can make your money work for you across your career so that you can indeed stretch it longer across what hopefully won't be, but on average will be 25% more years in poor health.
Okay, I love it. We need to be our own advocate across the board.
Exactly.
Great. Okay, well, Kweilin, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of women.
Thank you, Holly. Pleasure to be here.
I've got just a little bit more to say, as I usually do. I think my biggest takeaway from that conversation was really you have to be your own advocate. And I feel that that really aligns with my own personal values. You guys may know by now, if you're sort of a regular on Made for More, that I believe so much in taking 100% personal responsibility. And we can't control what biases someone else might have, what societal conditioning has gone on long before we ever entered this earth. But we can control, how we move through our life, how we move through our career, and how we can be our own advocate. And I think that goes across the board. It goes with, my mom has always said when it comes to health and healthcare, like you have to be your own advocate. Yes, the doctor might be the expert in that field, but really you have to advocate for yourself. So it goes with health, finances, career choices, relationships. It goes across the board. Be your own advocate and never forget, you were made for more. A prenuptial agreement, or sometimes called a premarital agreement, is an agreement that two parties enter into before they get married that basically chooses to deviate from state law. It assigns rights and responsibilities regarding assets and debts that are acquired during the marriage. Some common misconceptions about prenups are, one, that they basically doom the marriage to failure, or that it's really planning to divorce, and neither of those things are true. But the real value of a prenup is talking about and creating rules around how the things that you acquire during the marriage are going to be characterized. A prenup can protect things like art collections, real estate portfolios, businesses, all those types of assets. The ideal timeline to get a prenup is not 2 weeks before the wedding. The final version of a prenup has to be presented to the parties 7 days before they actually sign it. So there's like a 7-day waiting period. As soon as you get engaged, you should seek a lawyer's advice and counsel on a prenup and start the process then, because the closer the prenup is signed to the wedding, the more likely that the court is going to think there was some sort of duress involved in that person signing it, and they have to prove that the prenup was signed voluntarily in order for them to be enforced. At Moore Family Law Group, we represent a lot of high-profile people, celebrities, professional athletes, business tycoons. If you already have a lot of assets or you think you're going to be acquiring a lot of assets during your marriage, we are the best ones to protect that for you and help you make your marriage stronger. Call Moore Family Law Group today.